Hello and welcome to these conversations on curating art practice and writing in times of isolation and social distancing. I'm Paul Stewart and I'll be chairing a series of conversations with different artists and curators around these ideas. This conversation is with Professor Dorothee Richter, who is a curator based in Zurich, currently the Professor of Contemporary Curating at the University of the Arts Zurich. We'll be discussing how not to be afraid in the times of isolation, Fluxus practice and online journals, and how to sustain making and collaborative actions whilst working from home. Hope you enjoy and welcome to Homework. So I want to thank you first for making the time available to have this conversation. I know it's really difficult all over the world at the minute in terms of trying to work out how to maintain a conversation as artists, curators and writers, to develop tools to maintain making and collaborative sharing of work, especially when we're in positions where we're having to close our galleries and our art schools. So how do we maintain making whilst also understanding the care and responsibility as artists to our communities and our friends? Thank you for joining me. So this is Professor Dorothee Richter, who is the Professor of Contemporary Curating at the Zurich University of the Arts, as well as Director of PhD in Curating at University of Reading. Is that correct? What would be really great if you could just give a bit of background to your practice and your interests before we start talking about different ways we can make and share in our current contemporary times.
Of course, basically, at the moment, I'm very much engaged with the postgraduate program in curating, and you will see here all the different things we are doing here. Also, the PhD in practice in curating is a part of it, and curating on the move. So we have there different modules, but we have also a lot of talks. And for example, here, and you can also look at these talks totally for free from our website. And then we always do shared projects together, and they're kind of the core of the whole program, because of course you learn a lot when you do things together. Then of course everybody does also master project. And before we started, you actually mentioned that maybe Fluxus would be an inspiration for me. And that's very much true, I would say. I was researching Fluxus, and I wrote my own PhD on Fluxus, and I also did a film on Fluxus. I kind of will not show you now the trailer, but it would be maybe interesting for you to look at the trailer. And we did about 11 chapters, and each of them are not so very long. But for example, we discussed authorship and who was Fluxus, on how they work together and so on, gender and sex in Fluxus. Then George Machunas as the chairman of Fluxus, stars in Fluxus and the problem coming with them, politics in Fluxus and gentrification. So the interesting thing, or I was always very interested in Fluxus because it is a political arts movement. But of course, during the research, I understood that actually they kind of contradicted themselves all the time. But nevertheless, they kind of opened a discursive space where these differences could be discussed or even kind of not solved at all. But they created different platforms, for example, through newspapers and so on. And that is something I really think very interesting. Also, some of them kind of emphasized a lot, for example, Eric Anderson, that the way they stood in constant contact with each other, and already kind of through post letters and so on, they really kind of connected all over the world, that this was kind of a pre-internet way to communicate. And again, I also think that very, very interesting, because they questioned, for example, the authorship of a specific artist kind of so radically that I was really amazed about that.
Brilliant. I think that's a really good contextual basis to start the conversation. I think for anyone listening now, you can access the website on fluxusnow.org, and I think the book's available on curating.org as well, isn't it? Just thinking more about what you're talking about there, about pre-internet methods of communicating and sharing, such as, you know, using newspapers and mail-based practices within Fluxus. Do you think these are methods that we could apply to how we could communicate and make work now? What would be a contemporary way of thinking about Fluxus mail art maybe in our current quarantine lockdown situation across Europe?
Yeah, actually, that is another project I'm now kind of engaged with since 2008. That is also an open source possibility to publish. And actually, we are doing the next one together.
Yes.
Rating under digital conditions. And so again, there's a lot of different working process involved in that. For example, this one, Centers and Peripheries, Complex Constellations, or this one, Global Biennial Survey as a draft. These were developed together with students, or that one, Decolonizing Art Institutions. And others we are more based like on symposium we actually did, like Revisiting Black Mountain College or Decolonizing Art Institutions, and very often we work with different, museums and so on together. And I think also that it is really very, very important to share this kind of platforms and make not only the content available, but also the possibility to publish. Yes. So, for example, this one we would prefer not to was actually published by a curatorial program from New York. Or that one, What You Don't Want About AIDS Could Fill a Museum, was published by a researcher who worked on that, I think, over 2 years, very, very intensively. It's now a very, very big book if you kind of order it as a published book.
Brilliant. So really taking from those ideas is about collaborative sharing and making, is finding ways to publish and share all of the work that we are doing, maybe in a more digital context. So with the On Curating journal, with it all being available online, maybe this moment in time could be, or a positive to take from this really difficult time, is rethinking how we share and develop ideas. All of those ideas within the On Curating context, whether that's decolonizing art institutions or understanding art education spaces, are really important topics that need to be discussed on a regular basis. And I think maybe setting up collaborative reading groups that could go over these topics, using Skype or Zoom, or thinking about how to, think of more innovative ways of doing online journals of artists' works, and digital exhibitions could be a really exciting way of developing these ideas from the confines of all of our own homes at the minute.
So we actually always have our students, or some of our students, because some are based in Israel or the United States, Arab states, or things like that. So different countries, very different surroundings, very different contexts, and they only come from time to time to Zurich. So we have already set up a whole, background to share the actual lectures. So the transition from being partly in Zurich and meeting in real life and being just online was very easy for us. Oh. But of course, it was also important to emphasize at this moment the value of the social space, I would say. So we really we kind of tried to normalize a little bit the situation insofar that we just went on with doing all lectures, all talks, or as many as possible, and to kind of share the conversations. And we do this through Zoom. Mm-hmm. And as we also have a project space, or we are connected to the project space, and in the project space, you see it's at the moment closed. But we have recently done an exhibition together, this one, games, fights, and encounters, which kind of on the real and the level of the space. There's a lot of artistic and activist interventions to be seen and to be heard and to be read and so on, which of course now is also closed. But we also we initiated a whole series of lectures and meetings there, because for us the moment of constructing something like a public space, a space for debate and so on, was much more important than anything else. So we now, you see, some of them are actually cancelled, but some of them are still going on. We had now the talk, for example, by Yasemin Keskintepe, and we also had different talks now from Yoshinori Niwa and the Warsaw Biennial, and they are actually then live streamed through Facebook.
Oh, brilliant.
And they are partly, some of them are online still, I guess. So we try to do all our public talks. Sorry, I go back to the Curating website. The next public talk will be by Nina Rührs. She's actually a gallerist. It's very rare that we present or give gallerists also the possibility to talk, but she's a very interesting gallerist. She's dealing a lot with digital media, VR, and so on. And we invited her for a talk, and we live stream these talks now on our Facebook site.
Brilliant. With the changes to live streaming the talks themselves, but also you've already got this platform set up for mass kind of digital platform teaching or delivery with students who are located all around the world. Have you found it supportive of kind of that collective ways of approaching teaching, or a community of making? What are the best ways have you found from using these digital platforms to keep that kind of collective community working ethic that you normally, it's much more easier to make obviously in a physical environment?
Yeah, you're right. But I think our way to teach is from the beginning very much oriented to a collective experience.
Okay.
You know that you was also there.
Yes.
And worked with the students.
Yes.
And I think there's a kind of a spirit around, which is very intensive, that they take part, they take some roles over. For example, for this most recent project, they also invited a lot of the speakers and talks and workshops. So we always try to share that.
Yes.
And our shared projects, they are really about, of course, with very different degrees, but they are really about planning something together, organizing something together, setting up something together, discussing any of the positions we show, either activist or artistic or curatorial. And for me, it's always amazing because it's really more than, just the sum. All these different knowledges come together. Perspectives I could not have thought about myself, and so on. So I really think it's a very enriching kind to do that. And this social space we create through that kind of practice, that is really possible to transfer that into the digital.
Brilliant.
So mostly we meet as a group, not with public possibility. And that, of course, also feels then like a safe space. And of course, we also speak with everybody involved. Where are you? How are the things at the moment developing? Who has got the virus, or if a partner has got the virus, or so on and so on. What does that mean? How do you feel? How can we stay connected? Do you want to set up other groups as well during the whole thing, and so on and so on? It's really also a little bit about supporting each other, but supporting each other also kind of through the interest and through the engagement we have.
Oh, that's brilliant. I think it's really hitting home the importance of care and empathy, not just in terms of a learning experience, but also in this difficult time of what it means to have partners or friends or family who are suffering from the virus or feeling disconnected in some way. It's a difficult position to be in. I think this is all really relevant and super interesting ways that you've approached a learning environment through a digital platform. For those students around the world and university students who aren't used to this environment, who are now joining it for the first time, and for artists as well who've already left university or have quite interesting practices, what advice would you give them to being able to sustain making, or to sustain the ambition of making when kind of restricted in this way?
I really think, there was once an exhibition with the title "Thinking Alone is Criminal."
Mm-hmm.
And I really think that's so important, that you kind of leave the position of really wanting to be a single author or a single artist or a single curator and really work together with people. Mm-hmm. And that is something that is there in whatever medium you use. Of course, it has another quality if you can meet in the real time and hug each other or hang around or look at strange places as we do together or things like that, But kind of to switch when you have already the connection, to switch then to the digital is very easy.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. And it's about maintaining those communication networks, isn't it? I think this is the one thing that I'm learning now. There's the convenience of being able to leave your house and talk to someone, whether that's at the shop or at work or in the street or a friend down the pub or a cafe. Whereas now being restricted to your home space, especially as artists where we're normally freelance, independent workers, you have to put the effort in to remember to call people. And I think that's actually a really important part where you're saying it is really easy to move it onto the digital, but it's reminding that you have to yourself to take responsibility for having to call people, to keep in touch and to communicate. I think all of the work that you've been doing with On Curating and the curatorial program in Zurich over the years is really exciting, and I think it's really highlighting the importance of collective digital working from a Fluxus methodological background. And I think that, the issue that we're doing together now on the digital and the relationships to curatorial and art practice is more relevant than ever. We might necessarily have to revisit it with another issue afterwards to try and work out what the digital looks like post-quarantine, post-coronavirus, because this could be anything from 12 weeks to 18 months to 2 years. No one necessarily has a time frame on this new way of the world. But I think that all of those ideas that you put forward are super interesting, and I'm really excited to hear more about how these are going to develop in terms of the students' practices and what it means to have a degree show online. What does it mean to have exhibitions all online rather than in that physical space?
I know we are on the same page, and as I said, you should really publish your PhD on our platform. So,
oh, Dorothy, thank you. Well, is there anything else that you would like to add before I let you get on, enjoy some sunshine before any imminent lockdown?
Yeah, before the total lockdown. Maybe that I don't think it helps to be afraid. So. Of course, I also be sometimes a bit afraid, and but then I try really kind of to change that and to see the positive sides, to sit a little bit on the sun and the balcony or things like that. I really don't want to get afraid, because it's very important to see what's happening. Also, what's politically happening, to call the state of emergency all over. Which power that gives politicians and so on. But on the other hand, I really don't want to be afraid. I want to be awake.
I think that's really great advice and a really lovely place to wrap it up. To not be afraid, but to be awake, I think is a really nice sentiment and really meaningful. I hope you have a wonderful, lovely day, Dorothea.
Thanks.
And thank you for stopping by, and let's keep in touch.
Oh.
Okay.
See you soon.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.